Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast. I'm Hitzer,
I'm Isa.
and as always, we're coming to you from the Genre Equality channel. This is our spin-off podcast where we talk about basically kind of the pop culture things in the past, not necessarily current releases, but things that have happened that we really want more attention on.
Hmm.
More people to watch and see. And on this particular edition, we want to talk about specifically Singaporean art. This is a podcast. I know like some of our listeners are not based in Singapore, but we are based in Singapore. So we wanted to talk about some of the prominent works of art from Singapore that have come out in the last since our independence, basically. Because it is National Day. This month is National Day on August 9th. If you
Hmm.
don't know, that's our Independence Day. So we'll be talking about different aspects of Singaporean art lah. Not all of them will be in the same medium. One of them is a comic book, literature. One of them is a stage theatrical production, and one of them is a film that actually even predates our independence. It was filmed in Singapore, but I'll get into like the technicality of that soon now because some people don't actually consider it a Singaporean film, but I do, and I think most Singaporeans do, and maybe like Malaysians will take offense to that, but we'll get into that later lah. But like what is tried and true Singaporean is the Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chye by Sonny Liew. It is a fairly acclaimed Eisner Award-winning graphic novel
Hmm.
that came out a couple of years ago. To much infamy in Singapore. If you don't know, there was a lot of controversy here about getting funding from NAC, getting the funding pulled, and it is this depiction of Singaporean history isn't exactly the kind of whitewash version that the PAP would like you to see.
Yep.
So we'll get into that soon lah. Subsequently, we'll be talking about a P. Ramlee film called Ibu Mertua-ku, which translates as My Mother-in-Law. And then a very famous one-woman Peranakan play, The Emily of Emerald Hill, which has been redone several times. It's actually one of Singapore's most iconic stage productions.
Hmm.
It's been around for quite a while. I only recently got to see it because during the quarantine days, I mean, it's sort of over, but not really. But back when we were on real lockdown, Wild Rice actually put a version of the play up online to stream, and I managed to catch that. And Isa has actually been to watch it live, so
Yep.
we'll discuss our different experiences on that lah. So let's begin first with our main topic, which I don't know about other people, I consider to be the greatest work of art ever made by a Singaporean about
Mm.
Singapore. I don't know. Like, do you feel like it's up there? Is that a bit of a hyperbolic statement?
No, I mean like it definitely ranks up there as one of the greatest pieces of works that ever come out from Singapore about Singapore, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the controversy aside and the content that within the thing itself, like just the sheer quality of the work and the
Yep.
ideas that are presented and the way that it's executed. Like, it's the best visual story that I think we've ever had, right, from
Oh,
Singapore. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, yeah. If you're unfamiliar and if you're new to Sunny Liu's The Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chye, it tells the story of the titular cartoonist Charlie Chan Hock Chye, who came of age in post World War II Singapore in the
Hmm.
turbulent years of self government, merger, separation, and independence. Chan documents that period of riots and unrests in a series of vignettes, all kind of vivid allegories about the politics of the time.
Yeah.
This biography, though, is fictional, as is Chan himself. The novel is kind of merely a conduit through which Liew offers his take on Singaporean history,
Hmm.
the development and style of governance, as well as it's also a work of historical revisionism. It challenges conventional understandings of Singapore's past,
Yeah.
and as a work of metafiction, it also calls on the reader to treat narratives put forth by the government with skepticism. But besides the political part of it as well, it's also a very metatextual take on comic books,
Hmm.
because the artist, the cartoonist here was inspired by legends like Tezuka and Carl Banks, and things like that. Sonny Liew basically recreated his comic strips and comic books like an Astro Boy inspired What's Giant Robot, that kind of thing. So it's very meta into comics, and it's very meta into its historical revisionism as well. It's been, I think, a few years since you last read it, probably when it first came out. I read it like on an annual basis around this time because it's important. Well, having not read it for a while, what do you think about it,
Well,
Isa?
I just reread it a couple of days ago.
Yep.
But my first encounter with the Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chye was shortly after its release, maybe about a year, I think, when it made news and all of that. Just after
Mm-hmm.
it won, maybe I can't remember if it was just before or just after it won the Eisner Awards. That
Mm-hmm.
was 2017. So it's been a couple of years.
Yep.
Um, well, okay. So the meta textuality aside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in and of itself, the way in which this story is told is fascinating because when I first read this, I actually thought that
Mm.
Charlie Chan Hock Chye was an actual person.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right, because I just kind of dived into it. Like I understood the context in which like why Sonny Liu was like getting into trouble.
Mm.
With our arts council and things like that. Like I kind of did that, but like the actual content itself, I didn't really dive that deep into it. So I started reading it without that prior knowledge, and
Yep.
I fully believed right that Charlie Chan Hock Chye was an actual person of whom I
Mm.
had never heard about, whose art I've never seen, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, how did I ever not know about someone of this quality? Of
Mm-hmm.
course, after reading it through the first time round, when I first got my hands off, I realized that okay, no, it is a fictional character, but the
Mm-hmm.
story is so well told, and I think so well researched, both in terms of the actual history that it's trying to cover, as
Yep.
well as the fictionalized history of Charlie.
Yeah.
That it is incredibly difficult it's very easy to feel like Charlie Chan Hock Chye was someone that existed in his
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the way that it is told. It is a graphic novel that is documentary like in the most like fine of ways, right? Like the fidelity in which it's done is pretty
Mm.
amazing. The attention to detail, the painstaking kind of like recreations,
Recreations. Yeah.
yeah, recreations of the artwork,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's from and all of that really does build into its own kind of mythos that is entirely believable.
Yes, yeah, it's documentary in almost like kind of like an American Splendor kind of way.
Yes.
But that was an biographical comic book about the writer himself.
Yeah.
So this is somewhat like that, but not really. It reminds me a bit of Michael Chabon's The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. About
Mm.
comic book writers and how they come up and things like that. But what's most impressive is kind of the the recreation of the various styles.
Yeah.
He had to make the book look like a real dossier of an artist's work, and
Yeah.
and the results are perfectly believable. I mean, as you believed it, right?
Yeah.
And kind of mixed in with the full color, the full page, full color comics, unfinished pencil sketches, and
Mm.
convincingly dog-eared mock-ups of Dragon, the magazine that Charlie is supposed to have to try it unsuccessfully to publish in the 50s. Someone has even sewed and photographed a little stuffed doll of one of the early characters.
Mm-hmm.
The portraits of friends, family, Charlie himself, and significantly both the political figures involved, Lee Kuan Yew especially, kind of display Sunny Liu's high art chops. It's a
Mm.
very versatile and very dazzling piece of work outside of the politics of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's insane to find a book like this that can so acerbically and succinctly uh, polemicize Singaporean history, stretching back to before World War II.
Mm-hmm.
As Liew tells it, Charlie was quite radical in his sympathies, and most of the comics provide a very firebrand take on the issues of the day, using perky children and animals to lambast government oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie ostensibly drew a strip in the 50s and the 60s, kind of the Bukit Chapalang, which is kind of satirizing the politics of colonial independence and the short-lived union with Malaysia. So I mean, all of these stuff is so fascinating to read in of itself. Just those comic strips.
Yep.
Let alone the larger framework we've been in. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, like how. Oh, I'm so curious as to how does one hold all of that at the same time, right? Like as a
Mm-hmm.
reader, we get to slowly kind of unfold all of that. We get to unfold the text itself, the subtext as we're going along, the meta text as we finish the book. But like that is it's a fair bit of work that needs to be done, both creatively and in terms of like how do you set up a story to be told
Mm-hmm.
of a fictional character retelling many non-fictional things,
Yeah.
right? It's an amazing kind of mind blowing journey to make your way through that, whether or not you are aware of the actual existence of Charlie Chan,
Mm-hmm.
or whether you are fully aware that, oh, this is supposed to be a more meta take on various things.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, it's so layered. It's such a layered book, that I think it is it's right up there with like things like Mouse and like great political and Persepolis, great political comic books of that ilk, lah.
Yep.
It's so fantastic for Singaporeans, number one. But I think like if you're non-Singaporean, like, do you think you would feel the way that Singaporeans feel reading this, or will it be a bit unfamiliar, and therefore you won't have as much of an emotional investment and things like this?
Ooh. Hmm. As
Be-
I remember very distinctly as I was reading through it the first time, right? As we're
yep.
diving into kind of Singapore's history,
Yeah.
a lot of I don't know if repressed or discarded information from learning all these things, right?
Yeah.
As kids in school, kind of came flooding back. So
Mm.
there is a lot of that association and that kind of nostalgia of like discovering these little facts about our history
Mm-hmm.
that comes flooding back. I do think, however, if I wasn't Singaporean and I only had a very basic knowledge of Singapore's um kind of like founding and the players involved and all of that, there is still sufficient for you to be fascinated, right? I think
Mm.
it might be even more so just because it deconstructs a very widely propagated myth about the Singapore story
Oh
by
yeah.
creating a myth of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that to me, in and of itself, it's kind of crazy. Like you may not know the details, and I think a lot of the way in which the politics of the era is satirized and is peeled apart is very sharp and very well researched, and it's very hard to kind of not use that to kind of fill in the gaps, right? If you're someone who's not familiar with it.
Mm.
So it's utterly convincing for someone who knows not a great deal, but like knows fairly well what we're about and where we come from, given the fact that a lot of us come from the art scene,
Mm.
and we filled in our own gaps, regarding our history and not just what's fed to us.
Yep.
So yeah, long story short, I do think that if you do know that Singapore exists and a bit about our genesis, it's an easy enough read for you to come in and say like, okay, let's see what this is about, and be completely taken by it as well.
I think it's immersive enough in the not in a like spoon feeding you kind of way, but like you
Yep.
kind of just learn the history and culture and the values of the people in this country and what the social issues are.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like The Wire, like it's not
Yep.
it's not like a lecture, but you kind of learn it. In much the same way that I never lived in Baltimore, but I felt The Wire felt authentic. So and this feels authentic to me lah, and also because growing up in Singapore in social studies class and things like that, I obviously classes never really explored the history of 1950s communist leader Lim Chin Siong, for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Yep.
who was jailed without trial for years and kicked out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was barely a footnote in our history classes, in our
Yep.
social studies classes. Like he was there, but he was kind of portrayed as like a side character and or a villain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to learn the deeper facets of what he stood for and what the political divisions of Singapore were in the 1950s, and the initial alliance between Lim Chin Siong and Lee Kuan Yew, and then the eventual falling out,
Yep.
and all of that. So it is educational as well,
Hmm.
in addition to being entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think at this point it's kind of good segue to kind of jump into the actual politics of the book, right?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Um, I personally feel like here in Singapore, for setting context for listeners that don't know,
Yeah.
any sort of I do think it's better these days, but a lot of the time, any sort of dissent, right, especially
Mm,
from the arts community, gets treated a lot like what happened to Sonny Liew, right?
mm,
He got his official funding taken away
mm-hmm.
back from him, so he actually received a fair amount of grant money for this.
Yeah.
And after I can't remember if it was after publishing. I think it was after publishing. The local publication of the Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chye.
Mm-hmm.
He got that taken back,
Yep.
and it was because there were a lot of takes that in this story Charlie had that were not agreeable, right, to what the Singapore story is usually propagated to be.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my major, my initial kind of reaction to that when that all happened was just one of outrage, just because we've seen it happen so much here in Singapore. But
Mm,
after reading the book itself, right, like it is incredibly nuanced.
mm,
I don't think that um, the novel ever vilifies anyone. In fact, it presents a very, very kind of potent view on the nuances behind the individual characters, whether we're talking about the founding father Lee Kuan Yew or Lim Chin
mm,
Siong or any one of the historical characters that we're talking about, right? And even
mm.
in the novel itself, they ask things like, "Are you going to get in trouble? Like, is it okay to be talking about actual people?"
Yep.
Right? And that's a question that's pointedly asked several times, right? And to great effect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately he does, and I think like I don't see what do do we really have that much trouble with portraying and discussing and talking about nuanced and complex people and characters and politics, like
Yep.
it's just amazing that a work of art like this would not get the support it needs just because it doesn't exactly toe the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Like, just in general, we clearly um we don't hold the kind of mainstream, like PAP loving um opinions. You and I personally, I believe.
Mm. Definitely.
So
Yeah.
like, how do you feel like it was framed?
Mm.
Do you feel it took it too far? It didn't take it far enough?
I think it was framed perfectly lah. In terms of informing the casual audience of what Singapore is and the
Mm-hmm.
history of Singapore without ever really demonizing the political party in power. It merely points out its faults.
Yeah,
Some of the things it's done wrong, as has every government in the world, mind you.
exactly.
Like in fact, like I would say that the portrait of Lee Kuan Yew here is even a bit more human and a bit more empathetic
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
than the official story of Lee Kuan Yew. Because I see him as a person, I see him, I know where he's coming from. I get the decisions that he made. Sometimes morally questionable, but maybe politically necessary
Mm-hmm.
for country survival at the time. So I think that the controversy about this portraying our founding father in a bad light is a bit unfair because it doesn't at all
Yeah,
lah.
it does not.
The problem is that I think like our nation's narrative has been hammered home in textbooks and mass media and TV shows so much that to oppose it seems controversial because okay, number one, like it means risking detention,
Yeah.
or costly libel suits, or extreme marginalization in a country where the state controls most of the purse strings and kind of the levers of power. If you think about SPH and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
or at the very least, you get your money pulled, which is what happened to Sunny Liew, which is kind of the lower end of retribution,
Yeah.
that we can get here. I find it ironic that, after it achieved the acclaim that it did,
Hmm.
NAC came back and tried to co-opt it again.
Yeah, yeah. For the second round of publication,
Yeah,
yeah, they very proudly had their logo there. So
yeah, like if it's successful, then hey, we are down for it. It's a bit hypocritical there. So yeah, like I think a lot of people don't, if you don't live in Singapore, it's hard to understand the lack of the ability for political dissent
yeah.
to be viewed as a loving thing
Hmm.
rather than a terrorist thing, I guess. Because I don't know, like if you've ever seen documentaries like 1987 Untracing the Conspiracy,
Hmm.
or To Singapore with Love, stories about communist dissenters in the 50s and the 60s being locked up without trial, being tortured, being forced to confess on TV, being exiled, and being forced to never come back. Those are things that you never learn from the official story, lah, from the
Yeah.
official narrative in history books. So it's always crucial for either journalism or art to basically fill in the gaps or to refute things when they are not truthful,
Mm.
because these are kind of like the paragons of um, holding power accountable, art
Yeah.
and journalism, and the art of Charlie Chan Hock Chye. In the story, he's kind of political satirist, so he falls under journalism as well.
Hmm.
And the book obviously falls under art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is
And,
brilliant for what it does.
oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I like challenging the myths, and I think one of the big themes about the book is rescuing anonymity from people written out of the official version.
Yeah.
People like Lim Chin Siong in real life, and people like Charlie Chan Hock Chye in this fictional story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm,
It is rereading this again, right? Like a part of me just really wanted to like own, the
mm,
actual comics that uh if they existed, I would have loved to own all of that. Just kind of like the way that all of it is presented with the yellow old paper and the tape
mm,
marks there and how it's scanned and all of that, like
mm,
birthed a very like deep desire to like have copies of that.
mm,
Just because like the story is so well told, it makes me want it to have actually existed, right? Like for there to have been someone of Charlie Chan's caliber, writing the satire and drawing these comics and having like the rich kind of life that is told to us, you
mm.
know. How do you feel about kind of like the meta commentary about comic books in general and superheroes and so on, since that's very much in line with the last, I guess, 5 years, 8 years of our media consumption.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I loved it because it speaks to a time when comic books were not what it is today, lah. I
Yeah,
think every comic artist from or writer, from Alan Moore to Warren Ellis or whoever, right? Can say that comic books were not cool.
yeah,
Like when we were growing up, you found no success, you're not going to be a millionaire. Sadly, most of the people who created the multi-billion-dollar industry that is, the film industry today, based on comic books, are still not seeing a dime for it. Sadly,
yeah.
it's a bit it's like the story of the struggling comic book artist, filled with creativity, has a lot of things to say, experimenting with new genres, telling alternate histories, speaking truth to power, things like that. Like in the way that X-Men did, maybe.
Mm,
That they receive a credit at the end of the film.
yeah.
Thanks Stanley. Well, Stanley gets money lah. Thanks whoever. But you don't. Credit is nice. Money is better. So yeah, like those portrayals of him going to those old comic cons, like what we know of San Diego Comic Con today,
Hmm.
is this multi-billion-dollar monolith, like hundreds of thousands of people come. It's fucking like it's bigger than Coachella, it's things like that's Comic Con, right?
Yep.
And then you see the kind of very accurate depiction of Comic Con back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's not what it is, lah. There were a couple hundred like nerds there at most.
Yeah.
So I love the kind of deep dive into comic book history, not just comic books, manga as well. The
Hmm.
basic graphic novel history, like
Yeah.
like Osamu Tezuka is a huge influence.
Yep.
Walt Kelly's Pogo, Steve Ditko's Spider Man. Things like this are really great to delve into as a person who is of the nerd inclination, because I know the references,
Yeah.
I know the history of what he's talking about. So yeah, it was very rewarding to read.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and to your point about the comic strips, the comics in the comic,
Hmm.
it reminded me, like, I haven't felt like owning fictional comics. I know they're all fictional, but I mean, like, comics that are inside, the comics,
Yeah.
like, since I read the Watchmen, those pirate comics,
Yeah.
like, they were so good that I wanted them, actually,
Yeah.
like,
To exist.
and I think Sunny Liu's comics are just that good, like the comics within a comic.
Yeah. So good. So good. Like I wish, I mean, like, maybe one day, if he can be convinced to, like, have those printed out, though, that would be an amazing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, just like this world that Sony has created, of this one man's life, and how much has gone into it, and that you feel very much for the world and for this character.
Yeah.
It gives you exactly enough, right, to believe and root for and vouch for someone who is an entirely fictional character.
Mm.
And to use that as a medium to tell a nation story is quite simply excellent, excellent art that has been made,
Definitely.
despite the troubles that it's faced.
Definitely, like, there's also this hope that we can be better.
Mm.
But also mixed with that hope is a layer of sadness,
Yeah.
because, like, for all of that, it brims with all these diverse and colorful creations. But it's also fundamentally about a lack, the absence of an artist who should exist in Singapore but was never allowed to. You know, I'm willing to bet there are many outspoken voices, whether you are a poet, whether you are a writer,
Hmm.
whether, things like that, lah, who could have made works of art like Charlie Chan Hock Chye, but just couldn't.
Yeah.
So the book itself mourns for all the creators who have never been permitted to thrive in Singapore.
Hmm.
And Liu's own existence seemed to be evidence of a change.
Mm.
But, a small part of it, like the first step of it.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah. I'm glad that it has received the recognition that it has, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it deserves it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
whether or not, our government believes that it's art worth talking about, or whether it's art worth putting, their support behind it, is inconsequential, because it is great art, and in the at the end of the day, it's going to be recognized for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that has happened.
I mean, it's been recognized all over the world for what it is.
Yeah.
And Singapore seems to be like the last on the bandwagon. Well, we jumped on the bandwagon that was already full. But I think most of us in the art scene really felt a lot, for the character of Charlie Chan Hock Chye,
Hmm.
and for Sunny Liu, who faced so much trouble trying to put this work of art out. Like, he faced no trouble elsewhere. It was well received in the UK and the
Yep.
US and everything. He had trouble in Singapore, and this is the one audience that, like, really needs to read this, lah.
Hmm.
In the same way that, like, some of the more controversial political documentaries like 1987 and To Singapore with Love were banned in Singapore.
Yep.
And we are the nation that most desperately needs to have this counterpoint to the official narrative, lah.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm glad that a lot of these films and comics and things like that are slowly starting to be unbanned.
Hmm.
Singapore is kind of loosening its strict, uh, I guess, barometer for sedition. Like, not everything is is a communist, is a Marxist plot to overthrow the country, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a small step forward,
Yeah.
but, we are clearly, like, very far away from even uh America, I guess, or anywhere else, lah. To be honest, yeah,
Yeah.
sadly. But yeah, I mean, the art of Charlie Chung Hock Chye is such a phenomenal work that I highly recommend that you go to, your local comic book shop, or buy it on Amazon, or, I mean, Kino still carries it,
Hmm.
Kinokuniya in Singapore. So yeah, definitely pay your money. Give Sunny Liu your dollars, because he deserves it, man.
He definitely does. He definitely does. I'm really looking forward to more. amazing
Mm.
things of this ilk from him.
Yeah, one of the best parts about this book is that Sonny Liew, who is actually Malaysian born,
Mm-hmm.
but he came to Singapore at the age of 5. So I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's a Singaporean resident. But the best part about the art of Charlie Chang Chai is like how much clout he got in the comics industry
Mm.
after this because he started getting a lot of uh, big jobs, in Image, in DC,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So his career has really taken off since this, and I don't know whether he'll ever be coming back to making a small comic book about Singapore politics anymore, because he's writing and drawing for big titles like
Yeah.
like Adventure Time and stuff like that. Things that are actually making him money.
Yeah.
So I mean, good for him, lah. And like no diss to like those titles either, lah, because he's doing a fantastic job
No,
with them.
no, of course. I mean, like, the art of Charlie Chang Hai is a labor of love, right? That has seen dividends and rewards way
Mm,
past, just what he has kind of put in, right? And I'm glad for that because, like, it's a story that we don't see very often here in Singapore. So for
oh
him to
yeah.
get the kind of recognition of his talent and just the brilliance
Mm,
of it, I mean, like, it makes me so happy to know that he has been going places since he took a very big risk and put in so much work
mm.
in this very, in a labor of love, right, to the nation.
There was always this subconscious fear
Hmm.
that I feel like maybe Sunny Liu could have felt that he might end up like Charlie Chan Hock Chye,
I
alone and broke and stuff like that. That was the cautionary tale, lah.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
do feel that, especially when we're talking about, like, the portions of the story, that focuses on Charlie Chan Hock Chai's desire to kind of grow as a comic book artist, right? Like,
mm,
it did feel, autobiographical. I think there are moments there where you do kind of sense that anxiety,
mm.
or that question kind of lingers in the air, right? But of course, now several years have passed, and we've seen that has turned out to be different.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's why I'm like glad like he doesn't end up like alone and broke, in Singapore. Rather, he's a multi Eisner Award winning cartoonist and comic book writer and artist. He's worked in Marvel, he's worked in DC, he's worked in Boom Comics and Image and a bunch of other stuff. So his career has taken off.
Yeah.
So that's really great to see for Sunny Liu, man. Anyways, next up, let's talk about I guess we'll talk about the film first.
Yeah.
It is called Ibu Mertua-ku. It means mother-in-law in Malay, and it is a really classic 1962 Singaporean slash Malaysian melodrama, directed by and starring a silver screen legend, P Ramlee. Like
Hmm.
in Singapore and Malaysia, he's nothing short of a legend. It's amazing. But there's a small controversy because it was filmed, shot, and distributed by a Singaporean studio, and shot in Singapore in 1962.
Yep.
But obviously, at that time in 1962, we were part of Malaysia, so some people do consider it a Malaysian film. I think it can be both, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable given the context of when it was made, right? Like, why,
Yeah,
if it wasn't disputed at that point in time, why are we
yeah,
disputing its origins now? You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
with the whole thing, sure, we fight about the origins of food, did it origin in Malaysia, and all of that, but, like, I
Mm.
think P Ramlee is big enough, and his body of work is big enough for everybody to have a piece of that, right?
Yeah, for
And
the
they,
peninsula.
for the peninsula, right? And it
Yeah,
is very clearly a product of that time and of our those places, right? Both
yep,
Singapore and Malaysia.
yep.
And you can't take away from that, because if you want to dispute, like, oh, it's a Singaporean film, and it's very, it takes away from the magic of what it actually is, right? Because
Mm,
that plays so much into the stories that he tells. The
mm.
ability to kind of traverse between Singapore and Malaysia and the characters and all of that. Like, there was an opportunity then to tell those stories that isn't available now.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a bit silly for us to, like, argue about something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, like, like for example, I'm gonna off the top of my head, like Taxi Driver is a New York film,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't make it not an American film. It can be both,
Yeah.
So yeah, this is definitely a Singaporean film. It was shot in Singapore. It stars Singaporeans. It was made by a Singaporean studio, but also it is part of the Malaysian artistic heritage and fabric. So
Mm.
yeah, like let's just share this.
Yep.
It's to me, it's also a Singaporean film, so that's why I'm counting it here.
Yep.
If you don't know, the film story revolves around a tragic love affair between Kasim Slamat, who is a poor saxophonist, musician, and Sabaria, the only daughter of a wealthy woman. The opening kind of starts out as a light-hearted rom com, but about at like the 30-minute mark, it turns into a dramatic tragedy. I think like a number of like P Ramlee's works, it like you said, like it kind of criticizes the unofficial caste system
Yep.
that exists in Singapore at the time. The social divisions. Yeah, it also has like a banging soundtrack. If you don't know,
Oh
P
my
Ramlee
god.
was also a musician.
Yeah.
For most of his films, he composed the songs for it. He wrote it. He directed it. He starred in it. He was our Lin Manuel, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And also like for those of you who don't know, right? Like I have a fear of contacts. I have a fear of anything touching my eye,
Mm.
and I kind of don't know where that came from for the longest time until recently when I rewatched this film for the podcast,
Yeah.
because there is a really really famous kind of iconic eye stabbing scene in the film's climax that
Yeah.
I think scarred me for life when I was 5, and I think until now, like nothing can touch my eye. Like I
Yeah.
will only wear
Oh
glasses.
god.
Yeah. You've seen a bunch of like P Ramlee's works, like more of his comedies, right? His broad comedies,
Yeah. So.
Bujang Lapok and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your first experience with like a more dramatic kind of thing
Yeah.
with P Ramlee? Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. I don't think I had to watch a fair bunch of the kind of more famous, I guess, P. Ramlee films, especially Bujang Lapo. The comedic stuff as part of, several classes that I took on Singapore film.
Nice.
So yes, this is my first kind of introduction to his more dramatic works, and this is my first time watching Ibu Mertua-ku.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I have to agree with you. Like the music is phenomenal.
Yep.
From start to finish, it's so good. Um, and just to touch upon that one scene, right?
Mm.
The climatic kind of blinding scene.
Yeah.
I had this like Shakespearean Lear moment, out vile jelly kind of like moment when that was happening. I was just like, damn, to have that kind of like uh um for it to evoke right
Mm.
something so seminal as Gloucester getting his eye poked out
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Shakespeare, right, in a P. Ramlee film. Much less,
Yep.
I never expected it. Like
Mm.
even when you were telling me, okay, it's one more dramatic stuff and all that. Like I think the first 30 minutes really did kind of like set me at ease before things kind of ramped up. So I
Mm.
was caught by surprise as to how dark it managed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to kind of have uh, I mean, with the technology of the time, right? So much of the tone of it is set by the performances of the actors as well as the music, and less so, some sort of visual flair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is incredibly effective here.
Mm.
And scarily so, right? Because it's like the visuals don't really change up. They don't really change up the cinematography as well. But when the music shifts, right,
Yep.
it really does, turn the story on its head.
Oh man, yeah. I think the music plays a big part in a lot of P Ramlee's works lah.
Mm.
He's I think I would say he's actually more well known as a composer and musician than as an actor.
Yeah.
In Malaysia, but of course, like he's one of those like triple threats. Like he'll be an EGOT winner if there was one in Singapore lah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So his most famous roles to kind of fill you in are kind of more, I don't know how to describe it like broad comedies. This series of films called the Bujang Lapok films, Pendekar Bujang Lapok,
Hmm.
Seniman Bujang Lapok, etc., which are more like Adam Sandler kind of stuff. Not that they're
Yeah.
not that
uh,
they're not, because Adam Sandler at his height was like actually really funny, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm just saying like broad physical comedy lah
Yep.
was kind of his thing, So a lot of people didn't it kind of took a lot of people by surprise when Ibu Mertua-ku came out, and I guess still now
Uh huh.
that he had a more dramatic range lah, a bit like Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems.
Sure.
so
Yep.
uh,
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Okay.
so there's that like that dichotomy of him lah. So it displays his range as a musician, as a dramatic actor, as a comedic actor, as a director, as a writer. Because I watched it first when I was 5 or 6 with my grandma.
Wow.
I had only known about his comedy works, so um the twist at I would it's not really a twist, I guess, like the turning point of the film in the 30-minute mark ish were really took me by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
uh Shocked me, and again shocked me when I rewatched it, even knowing that it's coming. Like, don't want to spoil it. It's like that moment in waves. uh, which we just reviewed also last week. So do check that out. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite P Ramlee films, because it opened my eyes to his range.
Yeah.
I had no idea that he had this in him. I mean, the music and the comedy, I knew he had that in him, but the dramatic weight that he added to this performance was phenomenal, as was the music,
Mm-hmm.
as was everything else. He is kind of the pioneer of the golden age of Singaporean cinema in 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And if you want to kind of get into an idea why he is so well respected, I think I would recommend watching obviously the Bujang Lapuk series,
Mm-hmm.
and Ibu Mertua-ku as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
I would say what. Yeah. You should do the Budang Lapok stuff first.
Bujang Lapuk.
Bujang Lapok
Yeah,
stuff first. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It is still like till today. Like, I think Ibu Mertuaku, like, it's still heavily referenced in Malay pop culture. There's a lot of like pop songs
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. It's quite iconic. Like Kasim, when you mention Kasim Slamat, people already know what you're talking about. It's this intergenerational thing.
Uh huh.
That has which is what, like 60, 70, 80 years old now, or like close to 70 years old now,
Yeah.
and it's amazing that it's been so evergreen and has stood the test of time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great watch. I It's been a while since I've watched a film from this like general period, right? And I
Mm.
was just curious, with all the fancy, bright, fast moving, colorful things that have dominated our view, right?
Yep.
In this day and age, like I would struggle to be
Mm.
interested, but I didn't. And
Mm.
I was quite pretty fascinated by that. And I think like a lot of it had to do with just like the music
Mm.
really did help um
Yep.
to draw me into the movie.
I also would like to bring up that toxic fandom is not new, because Mark Dara, who plays the wicked mother-in-law, the titular mother-in-law, from Ibu Mertuaku,
Hmm.
actually received death threats. People tried to beat her up, and people would spit on her on the street and scold her because her performance was so good.
Yeah, it, there were points in time that were just like terrifying, right?
Yeah.
She went from like the makcik,
Yep.
like all the makciks, she went from that into a monster, really. And it was
Correct. Yeah.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy to think that back in the day, like
Mm.
it was a performance worthy of vitriol, and that's what happened.
It's amazing. I mean, also keep in mind like that this was back when, like, I think people thought wrestling was real. So you know.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I mean, kudos to Mark Dara, who plays the mother-in-law, who might actually kind of steal the show from P Ramlee, with the absolute like most hateable villain.
Mm.
At least I saw from when I was young. I mean, not particularly like nuanced character, but like, you want your villain to be hated, and
Mm-hmm.
definitely accomplished that job, man. Next up, let's talk about the stage production, a stage play. It's actually a one-woman show, if you can believe that or not. All it can be a one-man show if you're cross-dressing. It is called Emily of Emerald Hill. And it is kind of described as a one-woman play, but there are two roles in it.
Yep.
Emily and you. Apparently, the audience play a part of Emily's friend, to whom she confides the story of her life and kind of gradually exposes the secrets of her mind. So the play is kind of like this journey through human consciousness and through time. As Emily tells you about her life, we are introduced to a host of striking characters. We see vignettes of a period in Singapore which is no longer familiar, similar to Ibu Mertua-ku.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have heard her story, we ask, who is Emily? Is she a nurturer or a destroyer, a tyrant, a domestic tyrant, or a frightened child? Is she a traditional Asian housewife, or Singapore's first truly liberated lady? How do we understand her, and does she understand herself?
Mm.
And I think that the play is very fascinating in that extent, and also to an outsider's perspective of Peranakan culture. Since its award-winning appearance in 1985, a very long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
Emily of Emerald Hill has kind of become an icon of English language theatre in Singapore and Malaysia. Many different actresses have played the role, and it has been seen by more people than any other locally written play,
Yep.
according to the Straits Times.
Mm.
So, do you actually kind of experience Emily of Emerald Hill live? Do you watch it once or twice? And could you tell me what you remember about catching it?
Okay, so I caught it. Oh man, let me see. So the version that you watch, it's Ivan Heng, yeah.
Yeah, what rice? Yeah.
Walrus. So I caught it the last time round that he did it. And
Mm.
I believe that was in 2001. So it's been nearly a decade
Yep.
since that. And I also managed to catch one where it was played by Margaret Chan. So that's
Mm.
probably 2010. So I watched it twice by
Mm.
two different stagings by different actors
Yep.
in back to back years.
Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, like, honestly, it's been a long time.
Yep.
It's a bit difficult to recapture like specific moments.
Mm-hmm.
But it was uh, at the point in time when I was convinced to go the first time around, right? With Margaret
Mm-hmm.
Chan.
Yep.
I had heard of it. I
Mm.
had read about it, but it was one of those things that I had a lot of friends who were telling me that you have to go and experience it, right? Just because being a part of the audience is a big part of what's going on.
Yep.
Margaret Chan is amazing in the
Mm.
role. Like, I remember her standing there in all her glory on stage and just like a kind of singular spotlight, and like the way in which she delivers lines, like she embodied what I thought Emily would be, Emily
Mm.
Gunn would be, right? And then to see Ivan do that a year later, in in a similar but totally different take
Yeah.
on it was quite dramatic.
Mm.
Like, I wasn't really sure what to feel about it. I think when I left the theater after Ivan's one, it was
Mm.
great. It was good, but it was so different. Like, there was a very kind of different um, place I feel that they were coming from in the treatment of the source material. The way that
Mm.
they played Emily felt very different. Like, it had similar resonance, but at the same time, like, it was totally different, you know. So
Mm.
being there and having that kind, like, Margaret felt a lot like a mother, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
there were moments in time I was just like, oh my god, I'm in trouble, you know.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And being much younger back then as well, I was just like,
Mm.
oh dear, like there's sort of that f- familiarity as well as like a bit of terror involved.
Yep.
Whereas for Ivan, I didn't quite get the same feeling, right? Um,
Mm.
the way that both of them kind of like address the crowd with the
Mm.
questions and with the pauses and all of that, the intonations and the way that they went about it felt very different.
Mm.
uh so yeah, for that's essentially what I can remember from the two times I managed to catch it.
Interesting. Okay. I've never seen the Margaret Chan iteration of it, nor any other iteration of it. I've only seen the Wild Rice staging of it, which it's been staged for a very long time actually.
Absolutely.
The version I caught was the streaming version that Wild Rice put out during quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
Basically to kind of just if you rent it, you can. Actually, no, not even rent. It was free.
Yep.
You can I wanted to catch up on it because it was such a big hyped up thing in Singapore theatre, which and one of the most famous English language plays, monodramas that I've never seen. So I thought, why not catch this version? Like, maybe it's not the best version, but it is still a respected production of the story of
Yeah.
Stella Con's work. So I went into it not knowing anything.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, I wasn't in the audience with the participation and everything. But I felt like Ivan Hing my did a really good job. It
Yep.
was really really funny. And I was quite enthralled with his performance,
Mm-hmm.
as with the set design, the costuming as well.
Oh my god.
The kabayas are all like phenomenal.
Yep.
Uh, on stage, kind of the faded white house interiors. Kind of acts as a canvas for some projections in an attempt to kind of reflect the grandeur of the Emerald Hill Mansion.
Uh-huh.
So I loved I love that. I kind of love the staging of it and the setting of it. And I thought it lived up to the hype for me. Lah. Yeah,
Mm.
I was very worried about, like, watching Emily of Emerald Hill in the same way that I was worried about I think some people who maybe kind of missed out on the Hamilton hype train and just like watch it
Right.
now is like, is it worth the hype?
Yeah.
And I would say that Emily of Emerald Hill as a piece of text is worth it,
Absolutely.
and to see it perform live also worth it in Ivan Hing's version. Perhaps I don't know. Maybe other people will have different interpretations of who does the better job. But since this is my only experience with it,
Mm-hmm.
I thought he did a really great job.
Yeah.
And it also has to be said that, like, the version I watched is kind of like, I think, 8 to 9 years after his kind of original take on it,
Yeah.
because it was brought back for kind of a second, I don't know what you call it lah, like second staging, right?
Yeah.
So I think Ivan, from what I gather, like upon reading interviews and stuff, like with Ivan and stuff, that he adjusted his performance and is a more mature. Like he now knows better what to go for, like, and
Uh
isn't as broad as the first time.
I see. I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I do understand. I mean, like, I don't think it's a fair comparison, right? Like, I've only watched two out of the what, eight people who have played Emily over
Mm-hmm.
the years. I mean, like, New Zealand has done it, Claire Wong has
Yeah.
done it. I think Karen Tan has done it as well. And I've only seen the two, and I think, like, the only basis for comparison for me was just because at the point in time that was like 2 years back to back that I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Ivan's version was, there was so much flair. It was so flamboyant,
Yeah.
and I remember there being a lot of, like, moving parts on stage and kind of like stage
Mm.
swaps and the costume swaps. Like, it was an extravaganza in its own right that did not feel out of place from what the source material needed. But
Mm.
then in contrast, with Margaret Chan's kind of like more subtle and nuanced performance,
Mm.
um just like it just felt really, really different, and I'm
Yep.
curious, I'm curious, and I have a feeling that, like, Ivan's performance, so this taping, I'm guessing, was from last year, from 2019,
Mm.
would definitely have translated better for an audience that's sitting behind the screen.
Ah, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a feeling that that is the case, because you need that kind of uh loudness, I think, in order for
Mm.
it to translate a bit better for an audience.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So, were you watching it live though?
Uh,
Oh,
Live? No, no.
no, as
I didn't
in,
watch it live.
yeah, okay. Because I recall Chris telling us about
Yeah.
Chris telling us about watching it. And he was reading through the comments that it was happening, and there was just this
Mm-hmm.
weird confluence of the internet and Singaporean stage that
Yep.
he found completely absurd and hilarious.
Yeah.
Uh,
Streaming theater is not a thing lah. Like,
yeah,
It's not. You're not watching a DJ set.
yeah, exactly. And so he,
Yeah.
pressing F to pay respects and all of that. Like, I
Yep.
never in a million years would have thought that it would come to that. But hey, we are
Mm.
living in strange times.
I know, like I thought like of all things to be, if they were to stage this live and they can interact with, I guess, the comment section, that would- that would be interesting, because I think Emily of Emerald Hill is designed as a participatory
Yeah,
play with audience interactions.
yeah,
In lieu of an audience due to a pandemic, you could try something ambitious with streaming, but
absolutely.
I don't know how it would play out. But I do know that it will be entertaining, even if it's a disaster.
I would absolutely love. I would absolutely tune in to Emily of Emerald Hill meets Twitch.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
right?
Do it on
Like,
Twitch, and it's great.
and I mean, like, it would be difficult to keep to the script and all of that, but at the end of the
Mm,
day, it is a conversation, right? It was written as a conversation between the performer and the audience. It's just that the audience is very, very much different now when we are talking about with the internet,
mm,
and I would be fascinated to see where that goes, right? To
yeah.
deal with trolls and to deal with memeing and to deal with all of that,
Mm-hmm.
um while trying to put this on is no small feat in and of itself, right?
Oh,
But I think it would have
definitely.
some fascinating results.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think kind of similar to Pina also, in which I couldn't watch it in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I kind of wish I was there, like, so I can see uh Emily kind of scold. Like Peranakans are known for their fussiness, for punctuality.
Yeah.
So latecomers to the show are
Oh my
singled
god,
out,
yes,
and
yes.
yelled at by Emily. So I kind of want to see that live also, and kind of the attempt to teach audiences more about Peranakan culture,
Mm-hmm.
at various points, to meticulously prepare pineapple tarts, ensuring that we had the right ingredients and all of that. And the kind of the sharing her recipe to prepare the ayam buah keluak, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Like, it's all very culturally informative. In addition to being an entertaining monodrama that is very well acted,
Uh-huh.
very well staged with just like immaculate costuming,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
production value is kind of the word I was looking for earlier. Yeah,
Yeah.
great production value. At least for the wild rice version that I saw.
Yeah. The Wild Rice's production value from even back when I was the first one that one of Ivan that I watched, incredible,
Hmm.
incredible. Especially the costuming, like that consistently blew me away.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Love the music. Like, it's just a very fun play, like, the music, the joget joget and everything. It's just a really fun play. But also, dramatically relevant
mhm.
and insightful into a Peranakan matriarch's mindset, I guess. So I think it really has deserved the hype that it has received for over the last 1985, like, see, 95, 2005, 2050, over the last 35 years.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I highly encourage anyone who hasn't caught it to
Mm-hmm.
catch it. Whether I would say watching it live really is quite the experience. I think, like,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully when things open up again, hits and I can go and catch one more in
Definitely.
person.
I think
Uh,
Emily of Emerald Hill has been restaged over and over again for 35 years, and it will keep doing so.
yep.
So you always have a chance to watch a new version of Emily of Emerald Hill, or a revised version of the Wild Rice play, or something like that. Like, it will
Mm-hmm.
be out.
Yep.
But if you want to read the play by Stella, is also available on Amazon and online stores and the National Library if you want to get it.
Yep.
So yeah, it's worth a read as well, because it's a great piece of text too.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry. Did I cut you off earlier?
Uh,
What do you want to say?
oh, no, no, no. I mean, like, what? How it's we recommend it enough for you to get a hold of it however you can, right? Whether or not they're
Mm.
going to rescreen it, which they might, if things don't get better,
Yeah.
or whether you are fortunate enough to be able to go for um, a live theater experience for Emily of Emerald Hill, or you just want to read the text itself. Like, we highly recommend you go and get it.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm a fairly I would call myself like a Singapore theatre neophyte. I probably seen more plays than your average person, but I am by no means at all like well versed in the history of like Singapore theatre, and I don't keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Like, I have like other people in my life that like fill me in on that lah, like Chris, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that lah. So this is kind of like the one area of Singaporean art that like I enjoy being a casual in it.
Yeah.
I too often am too bogged down with that, like, the person that people ask about, like, hey, is this good? What is your take on it? When it comes to music or film and TV
Mm-hmm.
and literature, and like, I just want one thing where I want somebody else to help me. and theater is it, and I enjoy discovering things lah.
Yeah.
Like, and I enjoy, like, my belated discovery of finally watching Emily of Emerald Hill was great because I knew nothing about it.
Hmm.
I'm not a theater person. I have nothing to compare it to. I'm so like lost here, but I enjoyed it on a pure visceral level lah. Like, I just watched out. I just sat down. I watched it and I enjoyed it. And I so rarely get to do that. Yeah. So that's this is great, man. And I mean, I know we've covered some theater here before, like obviously Hamilton and the stage version of Fleabag, which I talked about a bit as
Yep.
well. And I think a couple of other things, but like I hope to get into more Singaporean theater in the future lah, once
Yep.
it opens up and there are new plays to talk about. That maybe we would talk more about stage and plays and stuff like that.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, man. And we will be back in 2 weeks.
Mm.
Actually, we haven't quite discussed what the plan is yet,
Yep.
but it's always good. Like, it will be good.
Yeah, it'll
It
be
will be
good.
good.
In the
Yeah.
meantime,
Yep.
Happy National Day, Singapore.
Yay.
We are here, and we are proud to be here. And you may not be perfect and all of that.
Mm.
If you guys are looking for more Singaporean works of art, specifically movies,
Mm.
that you want to check out, Hits has
Mm-hmm.
also written an article on Popwire,
Yeah. Yeah.
listing some of the best in on the silver screen that we have to offer. So please
Mm.
do go check that out. It's a long list. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of good
15.
stuff on there
Definitely.
that we both love. And if you're looking for more stuff, then please go ahead and check that out on Popwire.
Oh yes, thanks for the plug, man. I had a lot of fun revisiting some of my favorite Singaporean films.
Yeah,
And just it was interesting to see whether some of them held up.
yeah.
You know,
I mean, with the fact that we just got like 10 on Netflix. Is it 10? I can't remember.
I think we
Singaporean
got
films.
a, we got a bunch of like I think 10 or maybe more films and a lot of TV shows as well. Like Growing Up and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
You
So
know.
like, I mean, it's obviously timed and timely,
Yep.
clearly. But I mean, like a lot of these things are accessible now,
Yes.
more so than ever. So go check them out. Go see if there's anything that sparks your
Mm.
interest, and
Definitely.
yeah,
I would say that three-quarters of my list in the top 15, this is not an objective top 15 best ever in Singapore lah.
yeah,
I mean, the title is 15 Great Films of Singapore. It's from my personal opinion.
yeah.
And it spans our entire history, pre-independence even. There's some old Chinese and Malay films in there as well. I will say that three-quarters of them are available on Netflix, so they're very easily available.
Mhm.
A couple of them, the older ones, are not available on Netflix, but
Yeah,
it's on like fucking Facebook video and YouTube. It's all
you
over the
can find
place
them.
lah.
Yeah,
You can find them. And a couple, especially, are not available on Netflix because they're political documentaries
yeah.
about people who were tortured by our government and stuff like that, and exiled and political dissidents and all
Yeah.
of that. Similar to Charlie Chan Hock Chye lah. You get why lah. But again, hey, they've been put out for free by the filmmakers on YouTube as well. So all
Yep.
you have to do is search for it.
Hmm.
And I provided the necessary links and all that like in the article, so do check that out as well. And also, recently John Equality 32 came out as well, so if you haven't, do check that out.
Hmm.
We had a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. The Old Guard, which I really loved, and apparently a lot of people do
Yep.
as well. Japan Sings 2020, we didn't like so much, and lots of other stuff lah. And we will be back for more genre and more Behold in the coming weeks. So stay tuned to the Genre Equality Facebook to keep up to date, and also our Mix Club.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, man. Till next time, this has been Hitzer.
This is Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.